First of all, let me tell you a little bit about the name of the tribe. The tribe was the one that the Potomac River got its name from, and most people just call it Potomac, but the original way of pronouncing it would have been Potawatomi or Potomac, and that's the Algonquin language. Now, my cousin Buddy Jett has a little saying to help people remember not to call it Patawomac, because everybody tends to do that. He said, you can pat a dog, you can pat a cat, you can pat a cake, but you can't pat a womack. The Rowe family of Fredericksburg descends from a long line of mayors and the famous Reverend George Rowe, but they also descend from a member of the Colonial Council of Virginia, the Indian Princess Pocahontas, Chief Japasaw of the Potomac tribe, and even the great Chief Wahan Seneca, known as Powhatan, who was the leader of the Powhatan Federation of over 30 tribes. If you've seen a photograph of the Rowe ancestor Absalom P. Rowe, you'll see his undeniably strong Indian characteristics. And you might wonder how he got to look so much like an Indian when the Indian ancestor he had was so far back on the family tree. Well, the reason was that his parents, George Rowe and Lucy Leach, were first cousins. Their mothers were patent sisters of the Indian blood. And not only that, Lucy Leach's father, when you look back on some of the Leach family, were very closely associated with the Foley family, who descended from Chief Wahanganochie of the Potomac tribe, and I assume the Leaches have that blood too. Reverend George Rowe's mother, Sarah, and his mother-in-law, Elizabeth, were daughters of Evan Peyton, a son of Charles Peyton and Diana Williams. Reverend George Rowe's I'll bring that up later. Charles Peyton had married Diana Williams, and she was the daughter of Evan Williams, and that's where Evan Peyton got his name. Her mother was Christian Martin. Christian Martin was the daughter of John Martin and Christian Pettis, whom we know was named about 1636 from a legal deposition that she made. Christian Pettis was the daughter of Colonel Thomas Pettis, a member of the Colonial Council of Virginia, by the Indian girl Keoki, daughter of the famous Pocahontas, and her first husband, the Indian Cocoa, younger brother of the great King of Potomac and of Chief Japasaw. Many people have tried to deny that Pocahontas had an Indian husband previously to John Rolfe, but it's in the colonial records. The colonial secretary of Virginia, William Strachey, wrote about it and even gave the date that she married Cocoam in 1610. And he knew Pocahontas personally. And not only that, he lived with the Potomac tribe for quite a while and learned their language, and we owe him a lot because he left us a dictionary of the language and the meanings. It was the claim of my family's descent from Pocahontas that motivated me at the age of 13 to start trying to find out how that came about. As a teenager, I started interviewing some of the family elders and relatives. I used to get my grandmother and my grandaunt to take me around to visit these people because they knew everybody. And I learned quite a bit of information, but everyone was so adamant about being descended from Pocahontas. So when I went to college at the University of Richmond, I learned how to do genealogical research. And I was determined I was going to find out how we descended from Pocahontas. So I started tracing all the descendants of Pocahontas and John Rolfe. And I worked on that for years. And I couldn't figure out how on earth our family descended from it. And I thought, they must have just made this up. So just a decade ago, however, it came out from the sacred oral history of the Mattaponi Indian tribe that our tribe descended from Pocahontas. And their sacred history was passed down by the historians, and I was told by their historian who passed away about a year ago, Linwood Costello, that when he died, it probably would get lost because he said he was the last one that knew how to pass it down without it getting mixed up. And he said that was the feat of the historians, to pass down the lineage, and they knew that what was passed down was correct. They didn't have everything, but they knew what they did have was right. He said that Pocahontas had a child by Cocoam, and when she was kidnapped by the English in 1613, that child had to be left behind and was raised by the Potomac tribe. He also told me that he was a close relative of the late Chief O.T. Costello. And see, O.T. Costello married Elizabeth Newton, singer Wayne Newton's aunt. And so you're kin to Wayne Newton. And he was very instrumental in helping us to get state recognition. He gave up a couple of his shows in Las Vegas and lost a tremendous amount of money because of that, and came here and went to the state legislature with us to try to win them over. And we were accepted unanimously by both houses. But we owe O.T. Costello a debt of gratitude, because when he was dating Elizabeth Newton, he went around and talked to her elders back then and found out that they knew that they descended from Pocahontas through her first husband, Cocoam. And that just clinched everything that I had been trying to figure out. I could trace our family back to Christian Pettis and her mother, Keoki, and the only person on the family tree that could possibly have been Pocahontas' daughter was Keoki. Christian Pettis' family lived on land that adjoined the home of Chief Wahanganochie of the Potomac tribe. Christian's mother, Keoki, would have been raised by Wahanganochie's father, Chief Japasaw, whose wife was a sister of Pocahontas. My quest to find out more about Keoki's husband, Colonel Thomas Pettis, revealed a heartwarming story about Pocahontas and her daughter that has the makings of a wonderful movie. Hopefully someday somebody will do that. It was no mere coincidence that Keoki married Colonel Thomas Pettis. When Pocahontas was kidnapped by the English in 1613, she eventually became the wife of John Rolfe. They had a son, Thomas Rolfe, and John Rolfe took her to England in 1616. He took her to his county home in Norfolk, England, and little did I know that the Pettis family were their close neighbors and even related to the Rolfes. John Rolfe's cousin, Elizabeth Rolfe, married William Pettis, who was the uncle of Colonel Thomas Pettis. And they had a son that they named Rolfe Pettis. You can imagine the grand event when John Rolfe took Pocahontas to his family seat at Peacham Hall. The welcome home party would have included members of the Pettis family, several of whom were members of the Virginia Company of London and would soon be traveling to Virginia. You can just hear Pocahontas' plea to the members of the Virginia Company to please check on the well-being of her daughter back in Virginia when they would get there. Young Thomas Pettis was about the age of 17 at that time, and he evidently heard Pocahontas' plea. And when he eventually went to Virginia, he did just that. He sought out Keoki, found her, fell in love with her, and married her. We don't know all of the names of the children of Keoki and Thomas Pettis, but we've been able to piece together a few of them. Their daughter, Christian Pettis, who was named after the sister and the matriarch of the Pettis family, Christian Dethick Pettis, had two husbands, John Martin and Francis Waddington. She had children by both men, and I would assume today, from all the descendants that she had, they must number in the millions. Some of the families who descend from her are the families of Peyton, Rowe, Robertson, Sullivan, Newton, and many others. Another daughter of Keoki and Thomas Pettis, whose given name has not survived, is known to have married a Mr. Goldsby. And the way we know this, her daughter, Frances, came from some distance and settled back in this area when she was an adult, and she gave some depositions that told of her family connections here. Some of the Pettis sons were Thomas Pettis, who's also a multiple ancestor of mine, Stephen Pettis, and probably Robert Pettis, whose daughter Rebecca was the godchild of Thomas Madison, said to have been the son of Captain Isaac Madison, who once lived with the Potomac tribe. It's very likely that even Chief Wahanganochi's wife was a daughter of Keoki, because that was the only way that he would preserve the tradition of marrying a woman of the royal matrilineal descent in order for his children to become rulers. And not only that, if you trace down the descendants of Wahanganochi, so many of them claim descent from Pocahontas, so I think that was the truth. One of the brothers of Sarah Peyton Rowe was Charles Peyton of Stafford. He married one of my aunts, Elizabeth Robertson, and among others had a son, Thomas Peyton, who married Sarah Maddox, the sister of my ancestor Catherine Maddox Proctor. It was apparently very important to Thomas Peyton to carry on his ancestral names through his children. He named a son Charles Carter Peyton and a daughter Ann Carter Peyton, apparently after his grandmother, Ann Carter, wife of Evan Peyton. He had several other children, but the one whose name impressed me the most was that of his daughter, Rebecca Martin Peyton. Thomas carried on the important connection to the Indians through the name of Martin, named after his ancestor Christian Martin, and through the name of Rebecca, the baptismal name of his ancestor Pocahontas. We would never have known about the name of Rebecca Martin Peyton except that she died giving birth to a daughter who also died before the Civil War by her husband John Allen. And after the war, John Allen returned to Stafford and placed tombstones on the graves of his late wife and daughter and put their full name on there with the middle name, which was very rare at that time. We're very fortunate that so many of the ancestors named children after their own ancestors. Otherwise, so many of the ancestral names, especially the Indian names, would not have survived. We have descendants named Oroya, Ontana, and Keoki, and the Robertson family was the main one to carry on Keoki's name. One of the Robertson women married a Mr. Chilton and had a daughter, Keoki Chilton. My own great-grandfather, Walter Daniel Robertson, was a nephew of Louisa Shelton Freeman, and who was the wife of George Freeman, and they were the couple who founded Freeman's store up the street. Walter Robertson's sister, Eliza, married her first cousin, Henry Rose. And she wanted to name her last daughter after her ancestor, Pocahontas. Well, Uncle Henry wouldn't hear of it. He apparently thought that because of being named after someone famous, the kids would make fun of the child's name. But he would let her name the child after Pocahontas' daughter, who most people didn't know about, Keoki. It was all of this information about the ancestral Indian blood that started me on the long pursuit of tracing my Indian ancestry. It allowed me to discover so many links to other area families that I would never have known were my relatives. One link that most of you here share with me is the connection to the famous Indian princess Pocahontas and to the Potomac Indian tribe, who were instrumental in saving the colony of Jamestown from starvation on more than one occasion. Now, depending on the weather, the Potomac tribe is supposed to be at Ferry Farm, George Washington's boyhood home, on the 4th of July, Monday. And if you have a chance, please come over. I'll be there, dressed in little deerskins. And we'll have a living history set up with lots of crafts. They'll have net weaving, just like the Indians did it. I would hope they would have someone making the eel pots, because our tribe is the only one who still knows how to make eel pots. But I don't think anyone will be making it. They're kind of tedious. But they'll have corn grinding, and the children can even participate in that. and tide tanning. There'll be the dugout canoe that my cousin Buddy Jet made, and the corn water. And we'll have a museum tent with lots of artifacts going back to the 1600s and before. So please try to make it if you can. Thanks a lot.